The desert air was thick with dust and the smell of diesel fuel. The sun had already dipped below the horizon, leaving the forward operating base in a muted glow of floodlights. Soldiers lined up outside the small mail shack, each waiting for a letter, a care package, or a fleeting connection to home. Staff Sergeant Daniel Ward stood in line, his uniform still creased from the day's work. He wasn't expecting much. Madison hadn't written in weeks, and their last video call had been awkward, her smile a little too quick, her words clipped. Still, part of him hoped there might be something in the pile of envelopes. Something that told him she was still waiting, still invested, still his wife. The clerk behind the desk called his name. Ward. Daniel stepped forward. The clerk slid a thin manila envelope across the counter. It was stamped, certified, and official. No handwritten address. No playful stickers like Madison used to add to her letters when they were younger. Just cold black ink and government seals. He opened it carefully, his fingers steady even though his chest tightened. Inside was a stack of legal papers. A petition for divorce. Signed. Stamped. Delivered to him in the middle of his deployment. Around him, the usual noise of the base continued. A radio blared static in the distance. Someone laughed too loudly at a joke. Boots scraped against the concrete floor. But for Daniel, the world shrank into silence. He read the words once, then again. His heart pounded, but his face gave nothing away. Years of military discipline kept his body still when every nerve inside him screamed. He folded the papers along their original crease, as if tidiness could contain the chaos. He slid them back into the envelope, then into the side pocket of his rucksack. No outburst. No visible pain. He wouldn't give the men around him any reason to see him falter. Later, lying on his cot in the dim barracks light, the weight of the envelope pressed on him like a stone. He unlocked his phone, trying to distract himself with the usual news feed, when the first notification appeared. ACH withdrawal, $1,200. A minute later, Zelle transfer, $2,000. Another. ATM withdrawal, $600. His chest tightened again, sharper this time. One after another, the notifications stacked like dominoes, each one confirming what the envelope had already declared. Madison wasn't just leaving him. She was stripping him clean. Their joint account, the one he left open for household expenses, was being drained right in front of his eyes. Daniel sat up, elbows resting on his knees, phone glowing in his hand. He took screenshots of each alert, methodical, one after another. He wasn't thinking of yelling or calling Madison to demand answers. No, he was documenting, recording, storing proof in silence. Across the ocean, Madison was at an ATM, her lips pressed into a hard line as she withdrew stacks of cash. Later, she sat cross-legged on the floor of her new apartment, Cole beside her, laughing as he carried in boxes. Daniel didn't know the details yet, but he didn't need to. The envelope and the withdrawals told him enough. He leaned back against the wall, staring at the ceiling. His squad's laughter drifted through the barracks, but he couldn't hear it clearly anymore. He didn't curse. He didn't cry. He just let the phone rest on his chest and close his eyes. The betrayal was real, written on stamped paper and glowing notifications. But Daniel wasn't going to break. Not tonight. He inhaled slowly, exhaled evenly, and whispered into the empty room. Understood. It wasn't anger. It wasn't acceptance. It was a decision. The barracks were quiet except for the steady hum of generators outside and the occasional creak of metal bunks. Most of the squad had drifted asleep, earplugs in, boots kicked carelessly to the floor. But Daniel sat upright on his cot, the glow of his phone casting sharp lines across his face. Another notification appeared. Debit card purchase, $480, home and living outlet. Then another. Transaction approved. $95, key and locksmith services. He stared at the screen, jaw tight. Madison wasn't just pulling money. She was making purchases, furniture, locks, things that spoke of permanence somewhere else. Somewhere he wasn't included. He scrolled back through the alerts, one after another. It wasn't the money itself that hollowed his chest. It was what the money represented. Every withdrawal was a brick being laid in a life she had already started without him. A life with someone else. His thumb hovered over her name in his contacts. Madison. He pictured her face as it used to be, wind-blown hair from beach trips, her nose scrunching when she laughed too hard. But when he forced himself to picture her now, the image warped, sharper, colder, eyes turned away from him. He didn't press call. Instead, he opened the camera roll. Screenshot after screenshot filled the screen. Withdrawals, transfers, purchases. He organized them into a folder labeled Joint Account Activity. Methodical, clinical, evidence. Across the ocean, Madison was standing in a new apartment, white walls bare and echoing. She leaned against the counter, scrolling through her own phone, grinning as Cole, tall, broad-shouldered, anchor tattoo curling down his arm, carried a lamp inside. "We'll make it home," he said, dropping the lamp a little too hard on the floor. She laughed too loudly, nerves hiding under her smile. Back in the barracks, Daniel placed the phone face down on his chest. The room was dim, but he could feel the pulse of every betrayal in the glow that seeped through the cracks of the case. His hands clenched once, then released. He would not explode. Explosions left evidence you couldn't control. Calm left room for choice. "Ward, you good?" One of his bunkmates mumbled, half asleep. Daniel didn't answer. He couldn't explain, and he wouldn't. He just rolled onto his side, staring at the thin metal wall, the envelope still in his rucksack only feet away. His mind replayed the last call with Madison, 2 weeks before. She had been distracted, eyes darting off screen, her voice brittle. "You're always busy," she'd said, irritation edged into her tone. He tried to joke about the bad connection, but her laugh hadn't reached her eyes. When she ended the call early, he had chalked it up to stress. Now it was obvious. She had been somewhere else even then. With someone else. Daniel swallowed hard, forcing the memories down. He refused to let the image of her with another man settle fully in his mind. Instead, he thought of Elena, his sister, who had always told him, "You prepare before the storm, not during it." He remembered the binder they'd put together before he deployed, a collection of legal documents, revoked powers of attorney, updated accounts. A safety net he hadn't wanted to ever use. Now, the net was the only thing keeping him from falling apart. He reached for the phone again, not to call, not to text. Instead, he opened a blank draft email. His fingers moved slowly over the keyboard. Received the petition. Understood. That was it. 2 short sentences. No accusations, no begging, no rage. He hit send. Across town, Madison read the email hours later, sitting cross-legged on her floor as Cole uncorked a bottle of cheap wine. She stared at the message, her mouth parting slightly. "That's it," she whispered. Cole leaned over, reading. "That's good, right?" He's not going to fight. He pressed a kiss to her temple, pouring wine into mismatched mugs. Madison tried to smile, but the hollowness in Daniel's reply made her stomach twist. It wasn't relief. It was something else. Something colder. Daniel closed his eyes in the barracks, the hum of the generators steadying his thoughts. His heart still ached, but the decision was already made. He wouldn't chase her. He wouldn't plead. He would wait. Quiet. Controlled. Prepared. The betrayal was no longer a wound. It was a war he hadn't chosen, but was already winning in silence. Morning broke gray and thin over the base. Daniel moved with mechanical precision, lacing his boots, running his hand across the edge of his bunk to smooth the blanket flat. His squad joked near the door, gearing up for patrol, but his mind was elsewhere. Every beep from his phone the night before lingered like a phantom. Withdrawals, purchases, Madison's choices stamped in numbers. He slipped the phone into his pocket, but didn't open it again. Not now. Not with a mission waiting. Focus came first. Emotions would have to sit in the background like a weight he carried silently. Across the ocean, in the quiet suburb they once shared, Madison was busy unpacking. Sunlight spilled across the driveway as movers hauled out boxes labeled kitchen, bedroom, D's side, winter clothes. A box tumbled from a dolly, spilling sweaters across the pavement. Madison laughed nervously, tucking her hair behind her ear, while Cole bent to scoop them up. "Relax, babe," he said. "It's just stuff. We'll start fresh." A curtain shifted across the street. Elise, the neighbor, stood with her phone in hand. She'd known Daniel for years, remembered him mowing the lawn in the evenings, waving as he left for work. Now she watched another man carry Daniel's belongings inside, his tattooed arm flexing as he held a lamp crooked against his side. Elise raised her phone slowly, snapped a photo, then lowered it, guilt tugging at her chest. She told herself Daniel deserved to know. That night, she sent it to him with a short message. Saw movers today? Thought you should know. When Daniel returned from patrol, sweat and dust clinging to his uniform, he saw the message waiting. His thumb hovered over the image before opening it. Madison stood in the driveway, her hair in a messy bun, Cole beside her with that same lamp Daniel had bought years ago on clearance. A box clearly labeled with his initial sat on the curb, being passed into a new apartment. Daniel exhaled through his nose, slow and deliberate. He saved the photo to the same folder as the bank screenshots. He didn't respond to Elise immediately. He simply labeled the file, Movers, Date Time. In her new apartment, Madison leaned against the kitchen counter, wine glass in hand. The walls were bare, the furniture mismatched, but she smiled as if it were a palace. Feels good, doesn't it? Cole asked, pouring himself another drink. It does, she said, though her voice carried a tremor. She opened her phone and reread Daniel's email. Received the petition. Understood. The calmness unsettled her. No anger, no bargaining, just nothing. She tried to shake it off. He won't fight this, she said aloud, more to herself than to Cole. It's already done. Cole grinned. Exactly. Clean break. But in the quiet of night, when the boxes loomed half unpacked and the air smelled faintly of someone else's paint, Madison found herself scrolling through old photos. Daniel at the beach, Daniel fixing the sink, Daniel asleep on the couch with the dog curled against him. She shut the phone off quickly, pressing it face down on the table, as if burying the past under her hand. Back in the barracks, Daniel lay awake. The base generators hummed, casting a low vibration through the floor. He replayed the photo in his mind. Madison handing over his belongings as if they were meaningless, Cole standing too close, too comfortable. His chest tightened, but his face remained still. He whispered the same word he had typed in his email, a word that had become both armor and strategy. Understood. The storm was coming, but Daniel wasn't going to meet it with rage. He would meet it with preparation. The night air inside the barracks was heavy, but Daniel's mind was sharp. He had replayed Elise's photo a dozen times, studying Madison's smile, Cole's easy posture, the box marked with his initial being carried away like it belonged to someone else now. Every detail was evidence. Every image was a record. He opened his laptop on the narrow desk, the screen's glow slicing through the dim. A blank email draft blinked back at him. His fingers hovered, then moved with purpose. Received the petition. Understood. 2 short lines. No anger, no questions. He read it twice, then pressed send. Across the ocean, Madison sat on the floor of her new apartment, knees tucked under her chin, a wine bottle half empty beside her. Cole leaned against the kitchen counter, scrolling his phone. The apartment was bare except for scattered boxes and a sagging couch one of Cole's friends had left behind. Her phone chimed. She unlocked it, expecting another payment confirmation or message from her lawyer. Instead, she saw Daniel's email. Is that from him? Cole asked, glancing up. Madison hesitated, then handed him the phone. Cole read it aloud, his voice carrying a mocking edge. Received the petition. Understood. He chuckled. See? He's not going to fight this. That's as good as a blessing. Madison tried to laugh with him, but something about the words stuck to her skin. She had expected outrage, maybe even pleading. Instead, Daniel's silence felt colder, heavier, like a door closing without a sound. Later that night, as Cole drifted asleep, Madison reread the email in the dark. Her thumb lingered over the word understood. It didn't sound defeated. It sounded deliberate. A shiver ran through her, though the apartment was warm. Back at the base, Daniel shut the laptop and slipped the envelope of divorce papers into his binder. Months ago, at Elena's urging, he had visited Jag to prepare just in case. At the time, he'd thought it paranoid. Madison had seemed distant but not gone. Still, He had revoked her broad power of attorney, set up separate accounts, and locked their house title inside an LLC. He had left the binder with Elena, neatly labeled, each page notarized and dated. Now, he thanked himself for listening. The next morning, Madison sat across from her lawyer in a glass-walled office downtown. Papers sprawled between them. Divorce petition, financial disclosures, projected settlement. The lawyer tapped his pen. With him overseas, the court will process quickly. If he doesn't respond formally, we can proceed uncontested. Madison nodded, though unease stirred in her chest. She thought of Daniel's email again. Understood. No fight, no fuss. Too simple. Her lawyer misread the silence as relief. You're free, Madison. It'll all be behind you soon. That evening, Cole showed up with takeout and cheap champagne. To us, he toasted, raising his plastic cup. Madison forced a smile and clinked against his, but her hand trembled slightly. She wanted to believe this was freedom, a new chapter. But Daniel's absence wasn't quiet. It was loud in its stillness. Meanwhile, thousands of miles away, Daniel zipped his pack shut and prepared for another mission. He moved like a man under control, his emotions sealed tight behind discipline. But inside, each choice Madison made only steeled his resolve. He had all the time in the world to wait. And he wasn't waiting empty-handed. He was waiting with documents, safeguards, and a quiet plan Madison would never see coming. Rain fell in thin sheets against the apartment windows, streaking the glass as Madison sat at the kitchen counter with her laptop open. Bills and emails filled the screen. She scrolled through her bank app for the 5th time that day, checking the balance. The numbers stared back at her, smaller than they should have been. She frowned. That's weird, she muttered. Cole, sprawled on the couch with his phone, barely looked up. What is? Some of the transfers, they don't look right. Madison turned the laptop toward him, tapping the screen. It says pending reversal. Can he even do that? Cole shrugged, eyes glued to his feed. Banks mess up all the time. Don't worry. You moved it. It's yours. But Madison couldn't shake the feeling. She closed the laptop and wrapped her arms around herself, staring at the half-unpacked boxes still littering the living room. A hollow pit settled in her stomach. Across town, Elise walked her dog past Madison's old house. The blinds were drawn now, the yard overgrown since Daniel had left. She slowed her steps, remembering the look in his eyes the day he said goodbye before deployment. Steady, loyal, the kind of man who carried his pain silently. She pulled out her phone, hovering over his contact. She wanted to send another message, a warning maybe, but stopped herself. Whatever was happening, it wasn't her place. Back overseas, Daniel cleaned his rifle in the corner of the barracks. The rest of the squad was joking, tossing cards across a makeshift table. But Daniel worked in silence, the methodical click of each piece sliding into place, steadying his mind. His phone sat beside him, screen dark, but he knew Elena had everything under control back home. She had promised to follow through if Madison tried to cross the line. That evening, Madison's lawyer called. She answered quickly, hope rising in her chest. Please tell me it's moving forward, she said. There was a pause on the other end. It's complicated. His JAG attorney filed for a stay under the Service Members Civil Relief Act. That puts things on hold until he's back stateside. Madison's mouth fell open. What do you mean on hold? He already agreed. He hasn't agreed. He acknowledged receipt, the lawyer corrected. That's not the same thing. Until he responds formally, and given his deployment, the court isn't rushing this. It could be months. Madison gripped the edge of the counter. But I've moved. I've started over. Her voice cracked. The lawyer sighed. Then you'll need patience. Or compromise. When the call ended, Madison stood frozen, the weight of Daniel's single word, understood, slamming into her again. He hadn't given up. He had just waited. Cole sauntered into the kitchen, grabbing a beer from the fridge. What's wrong now? She shook her head quickly. Nothing. Just delays. But inside, panic clawed at her ribs. She opened her bank app again, staring at the balance. The numbers seemed to shrink by the second. For the first time, she wondered if Daniel knew more than he had shown. Meanwhile, Daniel lay back on his cot, staring at the ceiling. He didn't need to check the bank alerts. Elena would send him updates. He thought instead of Madison's choices, of Cole's face in the photo Elise had sent. His anger had cooled into something sharper, steadier. Not vengeance. Not bitterness. A plan. And though Madison didn't know it yet, the life she thought she had secured was already beginning to unravel. The morning light in Madison's apartment was cold, filtered through blinds she hadn't bothered to adjust since moving in. She sat at the counter with her coffee untouched, her laptop open again to the bank portal. The words glared at her. Transaction under review. Pending reversal. Her fingers trembled as she refreshed the page. The balance dipped lower with every update. It felt like the ground was shifting beneath her. Cole wandered in, shirtless, yawning. "You're still on that?" he muttered, reaching for the fridge. "Still on what?" she snapped. "The bank stuff." He grabbed a carton of orange juice, swigging straight from it. "You're stressing over nothing." Madison slammed the laptop shut, her chest heaving. "It's not nothing, Cole. The money is disappearing. I use it to account for everything. Rent, furniture, food." Cole rolled his eyes, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "Then use my card for a while." She gave a hollow laugh. "Your card? You barely have a balance." The words slipped out sharper than she intended, but Cole stiffened, his jaw tightening. "Well, maybe if you didn't jump into all this so fast." She cut him off, her voice cracking. "Don't you dare blame me. I left because I thought I was starting over clean." She pressed her palms against her forehead, her body shaking. "But he's doing something. I don't know what, but I can feel it." Across the ocean, Daniel was hunched over a small desk in the barracks, the hum of generators outside a steady backdrop. His squad was laughing somewhere nearby, but he stayed focused on the binder of scanned documents Elena had sent. Each page bore his neat handwriting, each signature a safeguard he had set in place. He didn't need to act rashly. The work had already been done months ago. He clicked through the files, calm and deliberate. Madison thought she had blindsided him. She didn't realize he had been watching the slow cracks in their marriage long before he deployed. She didn't realize he had already cut the ties she was trying to pull. Back in the apartment, Madison's phone buzzed with an email from her landlord. Her stomach dropped as she read it. "Notice, lease approval contingent on continued housing allowance has been revoked. Please provide proof of income or a guarantor within 14 days. Her hand shook so badly, she nearly dropped the phone. No, she whispered, rereading the words. Cole looked up from the couch, frowning. What is it now? They're pulling the lease, Madison said, her voice shrill. Because of the housing allowance. It's gone. Cole blinked, confused. Can't you just fix it? Madison's throat tightened. Daniel cut me off. The words hung heavy between them. For the first time, Cole looked uneasy. He rubbed the back of his neck, muttering, well, maybe we can find another place. Something smaller. Cheaper. Madison stared at him, tears welling in her eyes. She had left stability for this, a man who shrugged when the walls started caving in. Meanwhile, Daniel zipped his pack shut for another patrol. His face betrayed nothing, but inside, he knew the storm was gathering. Madison was starting to feel the walls close in, and she had no idea how tightly he had built them. That night, Madison lay awake on the couch, her eyes darting to the ceiling, Cole snoring softly beside her. She clutched her phone in her hands, scrolling through old texts from Daniel. Simple, steady messages, reminders to pay the water bill, notes about the dog. She wanted to hate him, but the quiet strength of his words haunted her. Her last thought before sleep pulled her under was a whisper she couldn't silence. He knew. He knew before I even did this. And across the ocean, Daniel's final thought before closing his eyes was just as steady. It's already in motion. The apartment was suffocating. Boxes still lined the hallway, unopened weeks after Madison had moved in. The smell of stale takeout clung to the kitchen, a reminder of nights spent avoiding the reality settling in around her. Her phone buzzed again, another email from the bank. She forced herself to open it, her stomach twisting. Notice, unauthorized transactions flagged. Pending investigation. Madison's hands trembled as she scrolled down. Several of the transfers she'd made had been frozen. Others were marked with a word she had never seen attached to her name before, clawback. She dropped the phone on the counter and pressed both palms flat against the cool surface, her breath shallow. She thought she had won. She thought Daniel's silence was surrender. Instead, it felt like a trap slowly snapping shut. "Babe." Cole's voice floated in from the living room. He was sprawled across the couch, half asleep, the TV flickering with muted sports highlights. Madison wiped her face quickly, hiding her panic. "It's nothing," she lied, her voice too thin to convince either of them. Cole sat up, rubbing his eyes. "It's not nothing. You've been glued to that phone for days." Her voice cracked. "The bank's freezing my transfers. They're saying some of it wasn't authorized." Cole frowned, confused. "How is that possible?" "It was your account." "It was our account," Madison whispered, her throat tight. "Mine and Daniel's." Silence stretched between them. Cole leaned back slowly, running his hands over his face. "Look, it'll sort itself out. Banks mess up. Stop spiraling." But he didn't sound convinced. His tone carried the same detachment as before, like it wasn't his problem. Madison bit her lip until it hurt. She wanted to scream at him, to demand that he care, but exhaustion pulled at her. She sank onto a stool, staring at the blank wall across from her, feeling the edges of her new life already fraying. Across town, Elise walked her dog past the apartment building. She glanced up at the second-floor window where Madison now lived. The blinds were closed, but the faint shadow of someone pacing flickered against the glass. Elise shook her head. She remembered Daniel's calm nod the last time she saw him before deployment. The way he'd said, "Keep an eye out, yeah?" Half a joke, but now it felt like prophecy. Back on base, Daniel sat on his bunk, reviewing Elena's email update. She had walked into the bank herself, binder in hand, and the manager had acknowledged the revocation of Madison's authority. Every screenshot Daniel had taken, every certified letter he had mailed before deployment, was now part of a tidy case file. He scrolled through Elena's words slowly. "They're freezing everything she touched after the revocation date. She won't see it coming." Daniel leaned back, staring at the ceiling. He didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He just let the silence settle. Meanwhile, Madison's lawyer called again, his voice clipped. "There's been an injunction filed against further use of joint assets." "He's moving fast, Madison. Faster than I expected." Her heart pounded in her ears. "But he's not even here," she stammered. The lawyer sighed. "Doesn't matter. He prepared. He's got people handling it." After the call, Madison slumped onto the floor, her head in her hands. Cole peeked around the corner, uneasy. "So what happens now?" She looked up at him, her eyes red. "I don't know, but I think I underestimated him." For the first time, fear threaded through her words. Not fear of Daniel's anger, fear of his silence. His steady, methodical calm was dismantling her new life piece by piece, and she couldn't stop it. That night, as the apartment settled into darkness, Madison lay awake, her mind racing. She had thought Daniel would collapse under the betrayal. Instead, it was her world collapsing, and his only weapon had been preparation. And somewhere thousands of miles away, Daniel closed his eyes, one thought anchoring him. She's finally starting to realize. The letter arrived in the morning, slid under the apartment door with a faint scrape. Madison bent to pick it up, her stomach already knotted before she opened it. The header was unmistakable, notice of lease revocation. Her hands shook as she read. The landlord's words were cold, legal, and final, because her lease had been approved based on projected housing allowance, which no longer existed. She had 14 days to provide proof of income or 3 months rent up front. If not, eviction proceedings would begin. Madison sank onto the floor, the letter crumpled in her fists. She couldn't breathe. The apartment, bare as it was, had at least been a symbol of freedom. Now even that was slipping away. "Cole," she called, her voice sharp, breaking. He shuffled out of the bedroom, still pulling a shirt over his head. "What now?" She shoved the paper at him, her eyes wet. "They're canceling the lease. We'll lose this place." Cole skimmed it quickly, then tossed it onto the counter like it was junk mail. "So? We'll find another." Her voice rose. "With what money? Mine is frozen. And you," she stopped herself, but the words had already left the cut. Cole's jaw tightened. Don't start that again. Madison pressed her palms to her face. You don't get it. Daniel cut off the allowance. He cut me out of everything. I thought I had him cornered, but he's winning without even being here. Cole turned away, muttering, maybe you should have thought about that before. Her head snapped up. What is that supposed to mean? But he didn't answer. He grabbed his keys instead. I'll crash at Mark's tonight. Figure your stuff out. The door slammed, leaving the apartment hollow, the silence louder than any argument. Madison stared at the letters still sitting on the counter, the ink smudged from her grip. She felt the walls closing in. Across town, Elise watched from her porch as Cole's car pulled away from the building. She frowned, sensing tension even from a distance. She thought of sending Daniel another message, but hesitated. Something about his earlier silence told her he didn't need reminders. He already knew. Back at the base, Daniel sat with his squad, polishing his boots in silence. His phone buzzed with an update from Elena. He opened it, eyes scanning quickly. Lease revoked. Notice sent. She has 2 weeks. Daniel set the phone down, steady hands finishing the shine on his boots. His heart didn't leap with victory. He only felt a quiet confirmation that every safeguard was working as intended. He had planted the seeds months ago. Now they were bearing fruit. Meanwhile, Madison wandered the apartment like a ghost. She touched the edge of the counter, the boxes she still hadn't unpacked, the couch where Cole had sprawled and dismissed her panic. None of it felt like hers anymore. That night, she sat alone with the lights off, the city outside buzzing faintly. Her laptop glowed on the table, bank statements pulled up, line after line of pending reversal stared back at her. She opened old photos, scrolling through Daniel's face. His calm eyes haunted her more now than his presence ever had. Tears slipped down her cheeks as she whispered to herself, why didn't he fight? Why didn't he just yell at me? Because silence, she realized, was worse. Silence left room for consequences. Silence let her destroy herself. In that dark apartment, Madison finally admitted the thought she had been burying since the first email. Daniel hadn't been blindsided. He had been ready, and the game she thought she'd won was already over. The apartment was colder without Cole's presence. Madison sat curled on the couch, knees drawn to her chest, the eviction notice pinned under a mug on the coffee table. The TV played quietly, but she wasn't watching. Her phone screen glowed in her palm, unanswered texts piling in the chat with Cole. Are you coming back tonight? We need to talk. Please just answer me. The 3 gray dots appeared once, then vanished. Silence. Her lawyer's call came that afternoon. Madison scrambled to answer, clinging to any thread of control. Madison, his voice was clipped, professional. I need you to understand the gravity of this. His JAG attorney has filed not only for a stay under SCRA, but also submitted an injunction against asset dissipation. That means, she cut in, her voice trembling. That means what? That means every withdrawal you've made since his revocation of power of attorney is now under review. Some may be reversed. Others could count against you in settlement. And he hesitated. The fraud allegations could complicate things further. Madison's chest hollowed. Fraud? I was his wife. The lawyer sighed. Not after he revoked your authority. You didn't have the right to touch those funds. He covered himself. Thoroughly. The line crackled, and for a moment Madison couldn't breathe. She remembered the binder Daniel always kept near his desk at home, papers neatly filed, his handwriting precise. She used to tease him for being obsessive. Now she realized it wasn't obsession. It was foresight. When the call ended, Madison pressed the phone against her chest, her body shaking. The silence of the apartment pressed in, heavier than before. Across town, Elise sat at her kitchen table, her phone open to Daniel's last message. Just a polite thank you for the photo weeks ago. She had considered checking in again, asking if he was okay, but something about his stillness unsettled her. She knew soldiers broke in obvious ways, anger, shouting, drinking. But Daniel's calm? That felt more dangerous. Back on base, Daniel returned from patrol, dust lining his uniform. He sat on his bunk, unlacing his boots, his phone buzzing again. Elena's update was short. Lease formally revoked. Eviction clock started. Daniel read it once, then set the phone aside. His squad was laughing near the door, tossing a football back and forth, but he didn't join. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his expression steady. This wasn't joy. It wasn't revenge. It was inevitability. Meanwhile, Madison's world unraveled faster. She went to the bank in person, clutching her ID, makeup hurriedly applied to mask her panic. The clerk behind the counter scanned her account, typing quietly. "I'm sorry, ma'am," he said, voice polite but firm. "The withdrawals after this date are flagged. We can't release these funds until the investigation concludes." Madison's throat tightened. "But I need them. That's my money." The clerk offered a sympathetic look. It was a joint account. His revocation was filed months ago. "We're obligated to honor that." Madison staggered back from the counter, humiliation burning her cheeks. The people waiting in line behind her avoided eye contact, but she could feel their stares. She fled outside, collapsing against her car, the world spinning. That evening, she unlocked the apartment door to darkness. Cole hadn't returned. His keys were gone from the hook. His jacket, too. She called over and over, but each time it went to voicemail. She sank onto the floor, the eviction notice in one hand, her phone in the other. Her vision blurred as she whispered to herself, "He's not coming back." And Daniel. Daniel already won. Across the ocean, Daniel lay on his cot, staring at the ceiling. He didn't need to hear her words. He already knew. The conference room smelled faintly of stale coffee and fresh paper. Fluorescent lights buzzed above, casting a harsh glow over the polished wooden table. Madison sat stiffly on one side, her blazer too tight at the shoulders, her hands clutching a folder she could barely bring herself to open. Her lawyer sat beside her, whispering reminders she barely heard. On the other side of the table, Daniel entered quietly. His uniform was crisp, boots polished to a mirror shine. He didn't glance at Madison as he took his seat, placing a slim binder on the table. His movements were deliberate, controlled, as if every second had been rehearsed. Madison's chest tightened. She had imagined this moment over and over during the weeks of silence. She thought he would arrive angry, broken, maybe begging. But Daniel's calm made her feel smaller than she ever had. The JAG attorney adjusted his glasses and began, his tone neutral. "We're here to discuss the current state of the Ward divorce petition, financial disclosures, and property claims. Let's begin with the joint account." Madison's lawyer cleared his throat. "My client accessed funds within her rights as his wife. She required them for basic living expenses." The JAG attorney slid a page across the table. "Except his revocation of power of attorney was filed and acknowledged by the bank months before those withdrawals. Transactions after that date are considered unauthorized." Madison's eyes darted to the document, the stamped dates staring back like a verdict. She swallowed hard, but her throat was dry. Daniel didn't speak. He only tapped one finger against the edge of his binder, steady, patient. "Furthermore," the JAG attorney continued, "we filed an injunction to prevent further dissipation of marital assets. Several of her purchases have already been frozen. Pending investigation, some funds will be clawed back." Madison's lawyer shifted uncomfortably. "Surely there's room for negotiation." The attorney cut him off with a polite shake of his head. "There's no room outside the law." Madison's hands trembled in her lap. She opened her folder, searching for something, receipts, explanations, anything to anchor herself. But the pages blurred through her tears. Finally, Daniel spoke. His voice was even, almost gentle, but it carried a weight that pinned her in place. "You mailed me divorce papers while I was deployed." He let the silence stretch before finishing. "I received them." Madison's head dropped, shame flooding her. "I didn't know you'd prepare all this." Daniel's jaw flexed once. "You didn't ask what I knew." The room felt colder. Madison's lawyer shifted, flipping pages aimlessly, but no one spoke further. Outside, the city bustled on, cars honking, people laughing as they hurried past the building. Inside, Madison felt like the walls were closing in. She had thought she held all the power when she drained the account, when she signed the lease, when she moved in with Cole. Now every step she had taken was being dismantled with quiet precision. The meeting ended with a stack of documents slid across the table. Madison signed mechanically, her pen scratching against paper. She didn't fully comprehend every line, but she knew enough. The house was untouchable, the account was sealed, and Daniel had cut her out of every benefit she once assumed she controlled. When it was over, Daniel stood, his binder tucked neatly under his arm. He gave her one final glance. Not anger, not triumph, just steady clarity. Then he walked out, boots echoing against the tile, leaving her trembling in her chair. For the first time since the envelope arrived overseas, Madison understood the weight of his one-word reply. Understood had never meant surrender. It had meant this moment, and it was already too late. The apartment was half empty when Madison returned that night. Cole's jacket was gone from the hook by the door. His sneakers, always tossed carelessly near the couch, were missing too. A quick glance at the closet told her the truth. His side was stripped bare. She fumbled for her phone, dialing him again. The line rang once, then went straight to voicemail. Her text remained unread. The pit in her stomach widened until it felt like her ribs might crack around it. She sat on the edge of the couch, staring at the eviction notice pinned to the fridge. 14 days had dwindled to 6. The landlord's office had called earlier, reminding her that without proof of income or advance payment, the locks would be changed. She had tried to sound calm, but her voice had broken, the woman on the other end speaking slowly as though she were talking to someone drowning. Madison opened her bank app again, praying for a miracle. But the balance glared back at her, shrunken and hollow, transactions marked with red, reverse stamps. She scrolled further down and froze. Her stomach turned cold. Daniel's name appeared on updates she didn't recognize. Beneficiary change filed. BH allotment terminated. SGLI reassigned. It hit her like a physical blow. Not only had he cut her out of the money she thought she'd secured, but he had also severed every lifeline she assumed would always tie back to her. Insurance, housing, benefits, all gone. Her hands shook violently. She remembered teasing him once about that binder he kept. Your little apocalypse file, she called it. Now she realized it hadn't been a joke. It had been protection. Against her. The next day, she showed up at her lawyer's office. Makeup smeared from tears she hadn't been able to hide. He cut me off from everything, she whispered, clutching the eviction notice. What am I supposed to do? The lawyer glanced at the papers, sighing heavily. There's nothing we can challenge. He filed everything correctly. You acted after his revocation. Legally, he's insulated. You'll need to negotiate, but he hesitated, folding his hands. He doesn't have a reason to give ground. Madison slumped in her chair, her throat tight. For weeks, she had told herself she was starting a new life, free from Daniel's shadow. Now it felt like he had been with her every step, dismantling each choice without ever raising his voice. That evening, she sat alone in the dark apartment, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound. She scrolled through her phone, landing on an old photo. Her and Daniel at their wedding, his uniform sharp, her smile wide. She pressed the phone to her chest and sobbed, the weight of her decisions finally crushing her. Across the ocean, Daniel sat at the edge of his bunk, letters from Elena spread neatly on the bed. She had written in her careful handwriting, Cole left. The lease is collapsing. She's on her own now. He read the words once, then folded the letter, sliding it into the binder. His squad mates laughed somewhere nearby, tossing dice against a metal cup, but he remained silent. He didn't savor her downfall. He didn't gloat. He only felt the steady confirmation of choices he had made long before Madison mailed the papers. Madison lay awake through the night, staring at the ceiling. Every corner of the apartment felt hostile, temporary. She realized now that the greatest wound hadn't been Daniel's retaliation. It was his silence. His refusal to fight had left her alone with the wreckage she had built herself. And as dawn crept through the blinds, she whispered to the empty room, her voice raw. He knew. He knew everything before I even tried. The day of the eviction, hearing dawned gray and wet, the kind of rain that seeped into everything. Madison sat in the courthouse hallway, clutching her purse with white knuckles. Her lawyer sat beside her, flipping casually through a folder, but she couldn't focus on a single word. The door to the hearing room opened. Daniel stepped out. He was in uniform again, his posture sharp, boots gleaming despite the weather. He didn't look at her right away, but when he finally did, it wasn't with anger. It was with something colder, recognition. Madison's chest tightened. She had imagined this moment with him raging, shouting, maybe even breaking down. But his silence, steady, unshakable, was worse than anything she had pictured. Inside the room, the judge had reviewed the documents Daniel's JAG attorney submitted. The LLC paperwork that shielded the house. The certified mail receipts proving Madison's withdrawals came after her authority had been revoked. The beneficiary changes the allotment forms. Each piece had clicked into place like gears in a machine, leaving no space for argument. The judge's words had been clear. This court recognizes the protections afforded under SCRA. The petitioner's actions after the revocation are without standing. Asset reversals will proceed. Madison had sat frozen, staring down at her hands. Every page Daniel had prepared months ago was now crushing her, one signature at a time. Now, in the hallway, she tried to meet his eyes. Her lips parted. Daniel, but he raised a hand gently, cutting her off without speaking. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't dismissive. It was final. Her throat closed. The words she wanted to say, apologies, excuses, please, tangled inside her chest. None of them mattered now. Daniel nodded once to his attorney, then walked past her, boots echoing down the tiled corridor. Madison turned her head to watch him go, her heart pounding. Each step carried him farther from the life they had built, a life she had chosen to burn. Outside, the rain came down harder. Madison stepped into it, the eviction notice damp in her hand. Her lawyer had already left. Cole hadn't returned her calls in days. She was alone, truly alone. Meanwhile, Daniel returned to base that evening, the air heavy with the scent of diesel and damp earth. His squad greeted him with jokes and laughter, but he only nodded, retreating to his bunk. He pulled the envelope from his rucksack, the same one he had received weeks ago with the divorce papers. For the first time, he opened it without a clenched jaw. He slid it into the binder, now thick with evidence, filings, and letters from Elena. The binder closed with a quiet snap, and Daniel exhaled. Not in triumph, not in grief, in release. Later, he sat on the back steps of the barracks, the night sky stretching endless above him. His dog back home would be waiting. The house was still his. His family was safe. The betrayal was over. In a small, dark apartment across the ocean, Madison sat on the floor, knees pulled to her chest. She scrolled through old photos, her tears blurring the screen. In one, Daniel smiled beside her on their wedding day, his uniform crisp, her veil catching the light. She pressed the phone to her lips, whispering through broken sobs, "I thought you'd break, but you never did." And somewhere in that silence, she finally understood the truth. Daniel's calm reply, that single word, understood, had never been defeat. It had been his decision, his line in the sand, his quiet vow that by the time she realized, it would already be too late.